Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is David Warrick, Executive Vice President at Overhaul. David, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Brittany. Great to be here.
It's great to have your expertise here because just on Wednesday, President Donald Trump did unveil his sweeping tariff plan in a day he dubbed as Liberation Day. Some of the details include a 10% or more tariffs on imports from most countries around the world. So as someone with a deep understanding of supply chains, what's your reaction to the policy? What's your reaction to the plan here?
So, I've unfortunately or fortunately, I've been in supply chain for 30 years or so. I had the pleasure of working with Microsoft for 23 of those years, running one of the most complex supply chains in the world. In my last few years, I spent a lot of time with early stage companies, but also with the industry, really trying to move supply chain forward. So yesterday, we've been doing nothing else but talking about tariffs for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Yesterday, to be honest, was a bit of a shock. I think it was more broad ranging than anybody had expected. And from a supply chain perspective, there's just numerous impacts straight away. Firstly, obviously suppliers trying to figure out, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with, our talk track over the last couple of weeks, Brittany, has been, okay, if there's a 10% or a 20% tariff, what are your options? Can you second source? Can you pass some of that back through negotiation with your suppliers? How do you minimize the impact to the consumer? With a 10% tariff or a 20% tariff, you have those options. With a 56% tariff, I'm not sure that you have anything close to those options, and there is going to be an impact to the consumer. So yesterday afternoon and today, there's been a lot of head scratching around, some of the biggest companies in the world saying, well, we knew there was going to be tariffs, but we didn't think they were going to be at this level. And what do we do now? How do we actually, what is it that we have to do to try and accommodate, and what is our next step?
I think the shock, the uncertainty, that's the worst thing for businesses, this feeling of uncertainty. So what is the next step for businesses, especially U.S. businesses? I mean, how is this directly impacting them?
So I think that there's a lot of different angles on this. But, I read the news stories every morning, and already we've heard today Stellantis are laying off, automotive workers in U.S. plants. So there's already, that surge. Small business owners are really trying to figure out, where do I source things from? I think about supply chain as, this continual 24/7 never-ending cycle. And for, what industries will be impacted hardest first? It will be those with a short lifespan, if you like. So think food and beverage. Those industries are going to immediately almost feel the impact. And so the knock on to the consumers will be somewhat immediate. For other industries, there may have been some level of stockpiling, there may have been, some preparation, but even then it's still going to be, in the next weeks and months, you're going to see that a European car, is now, going to be hit by 25% plus the universal tariff of 10%. But it's not just the cost of the car, it's the cost of maintaining that car, because all of those parts to maintain that European car are sourced from European manufacturing plants. So suddenly there's this, entire movement happening, which is, okay, do we even fully understand exactly what the tariffs mean? Do we know how to actually calculate the impact of the tariffs? And then what do we do about that? How do we think about displacing that cost between, do we take the hit on our own P&L? Do we negotiate with suppliers? And how much do we pass on to the consumer? And the consumer is not just going to accept, hey, okay, everything is now 40% more expensive. The consumer is going to say, well, no, you can't do the sticker shock thing with the consumer. If you sell cars, you still have to sell cars. So how do you alleviate that if you like, disparity to be able to ensure that your business still stays intact?
I think that's a really interesting point. How much can you realistically pass on to a consumer before they say, you know what, this is not worth it, I can't buy X, Y, or Z?
And this is the hot topic this morning, which is, what are the inflationary drivers around this? And it is, if suddenly that disposable income becomes more protected and consumers just say, you know what, I don't need to buy that extra item, or I don't need to buy, I, Nike. Nike moved a lot of their production from China to Vietnam with the last tariffs, back in 2018. So they now make roughly 11% of their goods in China and about 44% in Vietnam. Vietnam is now, has a 56% tariff. So are Nike shoes going to be 56% more expensive? That's really interesting. And what does that do from a consumer behavior perspective in terms of, am I going to spend that much money to be able to have that beautiful new pair of Air Jordans? I'm not sure that I need to do that right now.
And if I'm a business owner and I'm hearing that because of the tariffs, disposable income is expected to shrink, I mean, I'm freaking out right now. Let's say I own a shoe company. People might say, hey, I don't need those Air Jordans, as you said. I'm not going to buy them. I'm going to pull back. As you said, business owners scratching their heads today. These are more broad-based than people originally thought. What, as a business owner, I mean, what do you do? I'm
a better answer.
And I think that's what a lot of business owners are saying. They say, because the question before this is, how much can you pass on to a consumer? I mean, that's probably the magic number that they're trying to figure out right now today.
So I take a very high level look at this, and I say, okay, the tariffs were announced yesterday. They are what they are. I do believe firmly that it is the beginning of a negotiation. My grounding for that is in what we've seen with Mexico and Canada, which has been the entire topic of conversation for the last 30 or 40 days. And interestingly enough, they were not on any of the billboards yesterday, and the agreements that had been reached stay intact. So I think that there's now a period of reconciliation, and that will allow for certain companies, certain products to have, if you like, a little bit of leniency shown on those tariffs. And I think that was never going to be part of the initial announcement yesterday. I think that is part of the negotiation tactic going forward. And so my advice to business owners and to corporations and supply chains over the last 3 or 4 weeks has been really simple. It's been hurry up and wait, but be prepared to act quickly. Because I think that making strategic decisions today is just not going to wear that well for any business. I think the most important thing is to take the time, understand the absolute impact as it stands today, and then watch very carefully as the White House continues to negotiate and digest. And I think that we'll see some level of appreciation and hopefully some level of leniency start to creep in over the coming weeks.
That's been a lot of my conversations, the theme of them in President Trump's second term here, the seemingly slapdash nature of some of his policies. You've seen that with Doge, with Elon Musk and the Doge initiative, them chainsawing certain things and then realizing, oops, we did too much. You saw the start, the stop, the pause, the threats of tariffs the past couple of months, and it's almost been like a spigot where you turn it on and off. What do you think are some of the unintended consequences here of that and of these more broad-based tariffs that he announced yesterday?
I mean, I think when I saw President Trump lifting the poster yesterday, my first thought was that Doge may have cut too much on the media spend. And that was probably, that was the first result that we actually saw. But look, in general, I think that, there is going to be this period of negotiation. I think that, the president is very aware of the voting population. He's very aware of the impact of business. And I think that those statements are going to start to become more prolific in the news arena over the next, days and weeks, whereby this is going to hurt hard on a lot of Americans. A lot of Americans are going to feel the pressure. The numbers that are being bounced around this morning are anywhere from, $2,000 per family to $10,000 per family. Is the true impact of the tariffs that's not even talking about luxury goods. That's just talking about cost of living. I did see another story this morning which said the impact to inflation this year will be 1.6%, with a negative hit on GDP of 3.5%. Those are serious numbers, which are not good from our economy standpoint. And so we were already on a little bit of a precipice, and we were just slowly working our way into this soft landing. And so this will be a major, major upset. And so the policies and the decisions that are made over the next few weeks are super important in terms of keeping the economy stable and showing that, hey, we're ready to negotiate, but we're not going to do it at the detriment of our own economy and our own people.
When you're hearing those numbers, especially the economy was the top concern for voters in 2024. I mean, if this is costing you $2,000 and you're living paycheck to paycheck, a lot of people can't afford that. A lot of people, you're going to see the tightening of their belts here. I am curious what this does to our relationships with our trading partners. If you're a business owner in America, I mean, what is this slapping tariffs on our trading partners doing for your business? Because even world leaders said, hey, America, you don't do this to your friends.
Well, I mean, interestingly enough, you even saw this morning, China is now renegotiating with the EU on EVs, on electric vehicles. So this could be a very interesting shift in global trade, whereby if you're going to have a protectionist strategy, you need to understand that it's not just about importing, it's also about exporting. And those exports, we've all seen in the news, what Canada has done, buy Canada first. And you've had numerous US companies have come out and said, this is really hurting our business. Our products are being taken off the shelves in some, level of dispute. So I look at it, Brittany, and I think, you know what, this is not a one-sided battle. This is import and export. American goods are really important for the world, and any degradation in terms of our ability to export, and some countries will come back with a very, very harsh response on us. And that's going to be damaging not only to our economy, but also to the global trade. And then you've got to, look, I'm not a politician, but I am a supply chain guy. And I look at it and say, even if I was to press start today on building a manufacturing plant for any sort of high scale manufacturing in the US, realistically, that is 18 months to 2 years before I will actively be producing at scale. So you can't just flick a switch and bring manufacturing home overnight. It doesn't work like that. And so when companies today are looking at this scenario, we're having to look at these options, and they're saying, okay, the capital cost that I would incur and the fact that the payback of that capital cost could be anywhere between 8 and 15 years for a manufacturing plant, as opposed to, will I wait until the next term? And will these policies all be revoked at the very worst case in 3.5 years' time? I think those are starting to become interesting conversations.
And I've talked with a lot of economists, I've talked to other people who are supply chain experts like yourself, and not even from a political lens. They're saying, hey, not from a political lens, these tariffs aren't good for the economy. It's not good for trade. It is shifting our position in a global trade sense. President Trump said he's doing this. This will reprioritize domestic manufacturing. America has been taken advantage of for years. So this tariff policy will really put America first. But you're saying, hey, it doesn't work like that. That's really not the case, right?
Yeah, I think that over a very longer term, yes, it may work. But we've seen examples of this before. In 2018, there was a tariff put on washing machines. And washing machines, because a lot of those were coming in from Europe. The actual price increase on average of a washing machine, including those built in the US, was 34%. So Americans ended up paying more for American products, because if you think about it, the economics, foreign products are now going to be tariffed at this high rate, which makes them more expensive. If I'm a US manufacturer, I've always had to be competitively priced with, if you like, European imports. But now those European imports are a much higher price. I can raise my prices and generate more profit. So either way, it's like, well, okay, I get the longer term piece, and I think, bringing manufacturing back. Okay, yes, sure. Over a longer period of time, there's a lot of positive things about that. It's national security, it's jobs, it's all of those things. But it takes a long time. It doesn't happen immediately. And therefore, we are stuck in this interim period of, so what do we do instead? And that is where everybody's scratching their head today.
The word really on everyone's lips over the past couple of days has been tariffs. The markets were rattled by this announcement. Stocks plunged this morning. What do you think is missing from the conversation, from this really national and international dialogue surrounding President Trump's tariff policies?
I think negotiation. I think that even yesterday, if he had said, this, I want our trading partners to understand that I believe there's a painful relationship from a trading perspective between our countries. This is what I think is fair, but before I implement them, I'm going to offer you the chance to negotiate, and let's see how we can work in a fair way. I think that would have been my more passive-aggressive approach, Brittany, to be able to get to a better resolution.
David, there's certainly a lot of uncertainty here. And as we see how this plan exactly shakes out, what are the short-term and long-term implications, I hope you can come back on and join me for another conversation. David Warrick, you are welcome back anytime. Thank you for your insight.
Thank you, Brittany. It's been my pleasure.